Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we're going to be talking about how to convert your vintage garden tractor from magneto ignition to battery ignition. Now this is something that we've been doing as part of our 3 Ride-a-matics project recently. We completed the conversion on the red 1962 Ride-a-matic over there. We're midway through the conversion on our orange 1962 Ride-a-matic, and we get to decide whether the 1961 needs this conversion or not. Now, a Ride-a-matic is actually the perfect tractor to show you how to do this conversion, because the start charging circuit is actually a completely different circuit to the ignition, so we can just show you that circuit on its own. But that's kind of what we're going through today. So we'll start off by talking very briefly about how one of these magneto ignition systems work, and we're not electrical engineers, so we're not too knowledgeable about this, but on a base level, this is the Kohler manual here, and it shows a picture of what one of the magneto ignition assemblies looks like. You have a stator which has 3 prongs on it at the top here. Your magneto coil fits on the central one there, and then you've got a lead coming out of there, which is the HT lead going to the spark plug. Then another one that comes out that goes to the points, and then one from the points to the condenser. From what I understand, the condenser is to absorb excess energy and stop the points from arcing when they open. Now if we go to this other picture here, this kind of shows the prongs on the stator, the coil there, and the magnet, which is on the inside of the flywheel. Now when the engine is turned over, when you're trying to start it up, or when it's running, I guess, that kind of shows the poles of the magnet, and when it goes around, how, I assume that's the direction of current or something like that going through there, how that changes as the magnet goes past the prongs on the coil. Then that generates the positive that you need, and as the engine is turning over, attached to the camshaft is the points. They open and close as part of the timing, and when they close, that provides your negative, because the engine itself is earthed to negative. So when there's a negative coming from the points and a positive from the coil, then you get your spark, and that ignites the fuel. Engine completes combustion and starts up, or keeps running if that's what it's doing. But over here we have 2 engines with 2 different types of magneto ignition that were fitted to these K161s from Kohler. This is the engine out of this 1961 Bolens Ride-a-matic. We are questioning whether this is the original ignition, because most of the ones that we've seen have this style, but the one from the 1961 is the style that we showed you there in the manual, whereas this style, this engine came out of our 1962 Ride-a-matic, the orange one. It's kind of turned around, as it were. There's this, which is a magnet ring on the crankshaft itself, and then the stator is kind of inverted and goes against the magnet ring, and then the flywheel doesn't have a magnet on it. So that's kind of more compact, I would say. Now, from our experience, these coils tend to be more reliable. You can get replacements for this style coil. However, we can't get replacements for the stator part, and we think that might be the issue when it comes to the reliability issues that we faced with these. You can get replacement coils for these ones, but you have to get them from America. There's a couple of people that sell them, not original ones, but kind of aftermarket ones, I think, and obviously the issue there is getting them to the UK. So to kind of cut out the issues with reliability or having to get some of these sent over from the US, we are doing this battery ignition conversion. So let's briefly talk about battery ignition, and once again Kohler has helped us out here with a nice wiring diagram. Now we'd recommend only doing this conversion on a tractor that is already electric start. Now the reason for that is the battery, when you're running the tractor, will always be being drained, because that is the permanent positive coming out of the battery to the coil. And if you don't have a starter generator on your tractor, you can have no recharging on that battery, and it will either run out if you're using your tractor for a while and then the engine will die, or you'll have to charge it up every time you want to use your tractor, so it's just inconvenient. Whereas on something like our electric start Ride-a-matics, you've got the start charger there, so the battery shouldn't run out, and the electric start does exactly what it's designed to do, which is to be convenient, not an inconvenience. So here, as you can see, the battery positive goes to the ignition switch. When that's on, that's then a positive, permanent positive, to the ignition coil. And if you look at some of the wiring from our engine testing palette here, that does look like a bit of a rat's nest at the moment. However, we've just got a simple switch on there, and then our ignition coil here, which, remember, if you're going to do this conversion and you're going to buy one of these, remember to get a mounting bracket as well, because otherwise you'll be stuck for a few more days waiting for the delivery on one of those. We've been caught out on that before. So that's your permanent positive and the coil. Your negative to the coil comes from the points, again off the camshaft, exact same as with the Magneto ignition. And when they close, that gives you the negative because of the ground, which on this tractor and most tractors is from the battery negative going to the chassis, and then that negative going through the chassis to the engine. And once again, you've got the condenser to stop the points arcing when they open. So when the breaker points close, you then have your positive and your negative. Electricity goes through the high tension lead, and you get your spark in your spark plug. Now, we have had a few issues when it comes to ignition switches for these tractors, because you need a different ignition switch for battery ignition to a Magneto ignition, which we'll show you now. Now, it can get a bit confusing trying to explain the difference between the keys, or at least to me it can, so bear with us and we'll give it a go. But with what I was saying earlier about the starter generator being on a different circuit to the ignition, that means that there's a push button on here to activate the starter generator there, and the ignition key is solely for the ignition rather than the starter motor as well. So there's only two positions on the key, one there and one at 90 degrees to it. And it also means that the same Magneto ignition switch is fitted to an electric start Ride-a-matic as there would be on a pull start Ride-a-matic. Whereas the later Bolens had ignition switches with three positions on them, kind of off, on, and then a spring-loaded one for the starter motor. But as I said, that's kind of replaced by having the push button there. Now, there is a distinct difference between the Magneto switch and the battery ignition switch, which we only really realised when we were trying to go through the red 1962 Ride-a-matic, and I've drawn a couple of diagrams to try to explain the differences. Now, we've labelled the positions position 1 and position 2, so I hope that kind of helps with our drawing. But in position 1, for a Magneto switch like this, the two terminals are connected, which means that your Magneto is earthed, and therefore there's no positive that could possibly come out of it, and your engine won't start. Whereas when you turn it to position 2, the circuit is then broken, your Magneto isn't earthed, and then the Magneto can create the positive that then goes to the HT lead, well, and the points and everything like that. So that's how the Magneto switch works, whereas battery ignition switch, in the first position, the two terminals are disconnected because of course the permanent positive goes to here and then the coil. So with that disconnected, you don't have the positive going into the coil from the battery, because otherwise you'd just be draining your battery and not doing anything, which would probably burn out the coil as well. And then if you put that into the second position, a battery ignition switch would then connect. Then you've got your positive to your coil, and assuming you're getting the negative from the points, your engine will start up and start to run. Now, originally, our idea was simply to use one of these Magneto switches kind of in reverse, treat that position as if it was the off one and then that as the on position. But the issue with that is in the off position for a Magneto switch, you can pull the key out, and then in the on position for a Magneto switch, you can't, which is a good safety feature, but kind of ruined our plan there. I should say, when I'm talking about the key, most garden tractors use these standard INDAC keys, and it's kind of one shape and size fits all, which is handy for going between tractors. And we hadn't actually talked to the company INDAC until very recently, when we came across this problem. Now, we did have a look at possibly trying to modify one of these to work for battery ignition, but that was looking a bit complicated. So we got in touch with INDAC to try to see if we could get a key switch that looked exactly like this, still two positions, but for battery ignition instead of Magneto. And they were very helpful people over at INDAC, and now we have an order of these, which are the battery switches. As you can see, they are pretty much the exact same design and everything. Two terminals, two positions, and that means that when we put these onto our Ride-a-matics, it will look exactly original. However, we'll have our battery ignition system, which is more reliable, so the conversion looks more genuine, as it were. And I've deliberately kept a key in the Magneto one and no key in the battery one, so that I can actually tell the difference. I hope that explanation was helpful to someone at least, but quick disclaimer, I'd recommend, if you're going to do this conversion on one of your tractors, that you do a bit of further research before attempting it. Obviously, we aren't electrical engineers or anything, so this is just kind of what we understand about doing this conversion. So as I said, I'd recommend doing some further research before attempting it yourself. But now I will show you kind of why we're wanting to switch each of these ignition keys. And what we're going to be doing now is actually switching the key on our red 1962 Ride-a-matic. Now, on this tractor, it has a car ignition key, and we've already taken off the hood for ease of access. Anyone that's got one of these Ride-a-matics will tell you that on a 62 it is quite difficult to get the hood off at times. And also we've disconnected the battery because there's lots of wires here, lots of positive wires, and if you touch one of those and at the dash tower, in effect, one's positive, one's negative, and we don't want all of that mess. But as I said, this is a car ignition barrel, and something we discovered when we were using it the other day is, well, we knew this had three positions with the spring-loaded one there, but when you put it in the on position, you can take the key out. So clearly that is very worn, and there's plenty of movement there in the off position as well. So that needed changing anyway, and also the fact that we wanted to take it back to original. Ideally, we'll do this without taking the fuel tank out, because obviously it's got a tank of fuel in there, and we don't want to have to kind of disconnect everything and deal with trying to maneuver it around these wires and everything like that. So we'll see how that goes in a minute. When it comes to the green 1961 Ride-a-matic here, this has a toggle switch, which really isn't ideal because it's quite easy to forget to kind of turn it back, I guess, or forget which position's which if these weren't here. Then again, we're assuming that the on and off kind of markings on the dash here are correct. So that's a good reason to switch that back, and again takes it back to original. The orange 62 Ride-a-matic here, we actually installed a pull switch on this, mainly because at one point we didn't think we'd be able to get these keys, so we thought this was probably the best alternative, because unlike the toggle switch, when you pull this out, if there was battery connected, there would be a light on here, so it'd be pretty obvious that the coil was still, or the coil still had the permanent positive going to it. So it was kind of our safety feature for that. But all three of these will get new keys soon enough, but today we will be doing the Red 1962. First, we need to take off the old switch, and this is going to be quite difficult for my cameraman to film, seeing as the steering wheel is a bit in the way. Now, first we need to disconnect these wires. This one is the switched positive wire going to the coil, which we put on when we were doing the work on this tractor, and that's insulated, whereas this one is not insulated, and that's the permanent positive, so we're not very happy about that. It's not an especially nice terminal either, so we'll be sure to try and change that once we've got this off. Now, the spanner for this is 15/16, which is handy because it's also 15/16 on the new key switches as well, or key barrels. That felt easier than it should have done. Let's see if that's loose enough. Just about to do it by hand. Might still get the spanner on there. Now, the new switch is similar length to this one, and when I say length, I mean kind of distance back from the dash. So we're going to try and leave the terminals as they are. However, if it gets a bit too close to the fuel tank, we might have to kind of bend them outwards a bit so that they go, or they leave a bit of space next to the fuel tank, because we don't want anything bad to happen there. We cut there because that thread was taking a while, and I think we forgot how long it would take for us to get the switch out from behind the dash here. It's quite difficult with where the fuel tank is. And as you can see with the new switch kind of roughly positioned, the terminals and the fuel tank fitment is going to be a bit of an issue. So we will in a second take this out and just gently bend these terminals upwards by about 45 degrees to give us a bit more space around here. Also, we'll have to put a washer behind the thread here on this side of the panel, because the hole was enlarged for that other or that car ignition switch that was on here. So we'll have to put a washer on both sides to hold that in, but that shouldn't be a problem. We now have the new switch tightened up in there now, so that's all good. And we've also bent the terminals up a bit, and when we've kind of lined these wires up, it does look like they're going to fit. Now, obviously this one needs insulating, as we said before, so I will just cut this off, well, as long as possible still, because there isn't much of this wire left. Chuck that down there. And put a new end on it here. It's not really lining up with the wire strippers, unfortunately. There we are. Hopefully that'll be enough. Might need a tiny bit more, but yeah. It's all a bit awkward having the steering wheel and everything here, but we've got to do what we've got to do with this amount of space. Now I'll get a new crimp for that. We'll crimp that on and we can attach the wires. The wires are all connected now, and just to make sure that we didn't put the wrong switch on or anything, we're going to do a little test here. So we've got the multimeter set up on ohms or resistance connected to the speakers. So just to show what it'll sound like, if I tried both ends with the same wire, that sound shows that they're connected. So if I put it on the other terminal now, you can see in the off position, both sides or the two sides of the switch aren't connected. If I turn that on, That's now connected. The only reason that sounds intermittent is just because of how I'm holding it. Turn it off, on, off, on. So we can be confident that we've got the right switch there, so that's good. And now what we can do is put the hood on. We won't do that on camera because it's quite a difficult job to get that back on. And then we can call this job done. Just wanted to say apologies for the camera kind of going out of focus quite frequently. The camera seems to quite like the steering wheel, and that is very difficult for my cameraman to kind of film around it when we're working on the key area. We have the hood back on now, and the switch looks fantastic on there. We're very happy to have a genuine looking switch back on this tractor. And while it was a relatively small job just fitting this today, we spent lots of time doing all the research to make sure we got the right kind of switch for these. So although it was an easy job to fit this, we think that it's quite a big step forward for us to have found a solution to this problem. Now, if you're also looking to do this conversion, we can actually buy these switches from anywhere else, which is why we went straight to Indac, and they were kind enough to sell them to us directly. Now, because of that, we had to buy a quantity, which is not a problem. We've got a quantity of tractors, but we do have a couple of spares. So if you're looking to do this conversion, maybe we might be able to help you out. So drop us a comment down below or email me. My email's somewhere on my channel in the kind of updated about tab system on YouTube. So get in contact with us and we might be able to help you out with one of these switches. And now we are ready to put 2 more on the other tractors in this 3 Ride-a-matics project when they get to that stage. So that is it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.